Hello, and thanks once again for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. We've got a winter weather advisory out down from the blizzard warning of yesterday, and that's for the western Arctic coast, including Wainwright, Point Lay on down to Point Hope, and that's for wind chills to 55 degrees below zero with areas of blowing snow, winds gusting to 40 miles an hour. And that'll reduce visibilities to less than half a mile at times in some areas, and that's out until midnight tonight. And then off to the east there for the northeastern Brooks Range, eastern North Slope area, that's winter weather advisory also for similar conditions, wind chills of 55 degrees below zero, winds gusting 30 to 40 miles an hour. And that'll reduce visibilities in some areas of blowing snow. That's winter weather advisory out until midnight Monday night. And that's it for advisories, watches, and warnings around the state. Those are the only two zones there. And then effective April 5th, Alaska or National Weather Service Alaska weather zone changes. It goes into effect day after tomorrow on Tuesday, at least the way it looks at this point in time. Transfer of forecast office responsibilities, Anchorage to Fairbanks, Cantwell, Denali area, and Hooper Bay and Chivak will now be written by the Fairbanks Forecast Office. Weather products, that is, will be written by the Fairbanks Forecast Office. And then going from the Fairbanks office to Anchorage, Mentasta Lake, and Chisana there over in the eastern Alaska Range. There's also a new marine zone, Tolan Strait, I believe that's pronounced, to Doll Point, and that's a new zone for the Fairbanks office. And for more detailed information, you can find more detailed information in news headlines at the top of the National Weather Service Anchorage and Forecast web pages. So moving on from there, satellite imagery showing a pretty good storm rolling up the coast of the Panhandle today. Front having moved well inland into Canada there, weakening, and low center also weakening, but that brought some pretty gusty winds and a good amount of rain. Nothing too terribly heavy, but Heidelberg had about an inch of precipitation with that storm as it rolled on up. Petersburg, 3/4 of an inch of rainfall, and about 8 or 9/10 of an inch at Sitka, and Juneau had around half an inch of rain. And that fell as snow, higher elevation, especially up toward the Haines area where there was a winter weather advisory out earlier today for snow. Otherwise, off to the west, King Salmon picked up 1 to 2 inches of snow today, and some areas of light snow over the central interior, but generally nothing measurable and pretty scattered and light, along with the clouds. And band of mostly mid and high level clouds across the Kenai Peninsula, kind of a thick cirrus there coming into the central Cook Inlet area, and then to the north, get up toward Anchorage, nothing but sunshine, variable high clouds though, and mostly sunny skies. Madanuska, the Sitna Valley into the Copper River Basin, as well as eastern North Gulf Coast. There you can see clear skies right over Cordova, and then some clouds over the Copper River Basin areas. And out to the west, just a lot of cold cumulus clouds with cold air in over the Aleutians, snow showers extending from Unimak Island with pretty gusty west-northwest winds up to 40 miles an hour at Nikolsky and Adak. But those weren't the strongest winds in the state. That occurred over the southeast coast. Cape Decision having a peak wind gust of 57 miles per hour as that low center rolled northward. And Juneau had gusts to 50 miles an hour, and Sitka about 45 miles an hour on the wind gust there. Still pretty windy, though, up over the northwest interior with, Cape Lisburne seeing winds gusting to about 35 to 50 miles an hour. As you can see, the tighter gradient up there through the passes of the western Brooks Range. Pretty windy day once again, as well as the western Arctic coastal areas. But you can see that northeast wind flow trough just north of the Pribilofs, creating some light snow shower conditions in that area. But the wind's not all that strong. As I mentioned, stronger along the Aleutians there with a tighter gradient from the Adak-Atka area eastward into the western Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from 25 to 45 miles an hour in gusts, with snow showers occurring from the Alaska, actually Bristol Bay. As I mentioned, some snowfall at both Dillingham, King Salmon picked up 1 to 2 inches today, and that condition extending all the way back to the Komodorsky Islands. Otherwise dry across southern Alaska. Some scattered showers around Kodiak today, as well as the southern Kenai Peninsula, nothing heavy at all. And then the precipitation along the North Gulf, or over the Panhandle today, winds as that low tracks up into the interior there and actually kind of splits with that one center up into the Yukon. The other center is pulling west-northwestward into the Gulf and weakening as a much stronger system winding up there to the south. That'll kick off to the east-northeast and probably go into the south of the Dixon entrance area. Maybe a few showers will work up to the extreme southern southeast coast, with the main jet to the south. That'll carry that into the south with the cold air locked in over the Aleutians and the Gulf of Alaska. And you can see tonight that low tracks up toward the Queen Charlotte's front, already moving inland into British Columbia. As it dries out, as the flow becomes more offshore, east-northeast flow increases as that low tracks into the Queen Charlotte's there. So that'll dry it out and start to see some clearing over the Panhandle tonight. And then that remnant low there in the Gulf of Alaska continues to slowly weaken. And that'll keep rain and snow showers in over the eastern Prince William Sound area to possibly as far west as Elephant Cove. Best chance of moisture there for Yakutat to Cordova. None of that will probably reach into the Copper River Basin. Northern Cook Inlet stays dry, as well as the Manauskas to Sitna Valley and the Copper River Basin up to the Alaska Range. And that area of snow mostly in the hills north of Fairbanks, Chena Ridge area, and northward across Yukon Flats. That's a zone of scattered snow showers. And then a weak low north of Mackenzie Bay there will bring a chance of snow showers to the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, high pressure at the surface will keep it well below zero again tonight, anywhere from temperatures 20 to 35 below for the north slope for your lows, and it stays pretty windy through the passes of the central and western Brooks Range area. Low pressure in over the southwest coast results in snow showers there, a little more numerous for Bristol Bay and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Periods of snow and snow showers continue for the Aleutians all the way out to Shimei and Attu, and chance of snow showers at times for the Pribilof Islands. And then for Monday, stays dry for the St. Lawrence Island area, and chance of snow showers east or the Arctic coast, and another dry, partly sunny day for the Panhandle. Chance of moisture along the North Gulf Coast, and the outlook for Tuesday: chance of rain or snow, another surge of moisture coming northward there, and then turning into the Panhandle. Same sort of pattern for the North Gulf Coast. So across southern Alaska, mostly cloudy. Chance of snow showers or light snow. Same thing for the Arctic coast, and not much change. Starting to dry out for the Pribilofs, maybe some clearing there, but stays in a snow showery pattern and breezy for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Lows tonight, right around anywhere from 5 below to 5 above for the central interior areas over toward Eagle, and then lows 15 to 35 below for the north slope and the Arctic coast, in the 20s southern Alaska, lower to mid 30s for the Panhandle, followed by highs in the 40s for the southeast coast, and upper 30s to lower 40s southern Alaska to Kodiak Island, highs in the 30s Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, 15 to 25 for the central interior, below zero for the north slope and the Arctic coast. Lows on Tuesday morning, again 15 to 25 below for the north slope and Arctic coast, and a shade below zero in the central interior, 5 below to 5 above, call it, and in the 20s to lower 30s for southern Alaska, followed by highs in the 40s, lower to mid there for the Panhandle, and upper 30s to lower 40s, south central Alaska, Kodiak Island, below zero for the north slope and Arctic coastal areas.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather. IFR from the Brooks Range out across the north slope to the Arctic coast, and south of the Brooks Range, VFR over the northwest interior, down to the Seward Peninsula, most of Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, and IFR over the southwest interior from the western Alaska Range, Kuskokwim Valley, right out to the coastline, including Nunivak Island, Bristol Bay, IFR. Marginal VFR for the Pribilofs and the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR, especially on the Bering Sea side. Kodiak Island, some areas of marginal VFR, as well as areas of VFR scattered around. Cook Inlet, same pattern, some scattered areas of VFR. Eastern North Gulf Coast, scattered areas of marginal VFR. Panhandle, northern areas, IFR. Southern areas, VFR, marginal along the coast. IFR, Upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. And for the following day, or for the following afternoon, for Monday afternoon, IFR, Western North Slope, otherwise marginal VFR, Arctic Coast down to the crest of the Brooks Range, but coming south of the mountains there into the upper Yukon River area to Eagle, down into the greater Fairbanks area, areas of marginal VFR across southern Alaska with possible patchy IFR. Central southern Bering Sea, mostly marginal, with some scattered VFR in there. And Kodiak Island looks like it'll be mostly VFR on up into southern Cook Inlet. Marginal conditions along the North Gulf Coast and the coastline of the Panhandle, but inside waters looking pretty good, VFR. That transitions to IFR for the inside waters of the southeast coast, IFR for the North Gulf Coast, northern Prince William Sound, maybe marginal VFR into the Copper River Basin, some IFR for the Susitna Valley down across the western Alaska Range, and marginal for Bristol Bay, southern Bering Sea, Aleutians, marginal VFR, IFR for the Arctic Coast, central and west side, same thing for the North Slope, VFR, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northern Bering Sea, and the Yukon Delta, northward, VFR, right into the Noatak Valley, Kobuk Valley, western Koyukuk Valley. And for the afternoon Tuesday, interior Alaska looking really good, just about all VFR along the Yukon River Valley there into the Tanana Valley. And then from about the Alaska Range southward, marginal VFR with possible areas of IFR scattered around, except right over the open waters of Cook Inlet should be VFR. Down into Bristol Bay, VFR for the western southeast coast, Lynn Canal, IFR, and IFR out over the southwest Bering Sea, otherwise marginal conditions from roughly the Pribilofs southward to the Fox Islands and the Alaska Peninsula. And Atuvik, marginal VFR tomorrow, same forecast for Adigan, occasional marginal VFR possible. Lake Clark and Merrill, possible marginal VFR at times, maybe VFR at other times. Rainy, could go either way tomorrow, VFR to marginal VFR maybe. And for windy, I'm going to optimistically keep it VFR. Isabel, VFR. Mintesta, VFR. And then for Tanita, possibly increasing moisture might create some marginal VFR conditions later in the day. That's just a slight chance. Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels at the surface tomorrow morning, just inland over southern Alaska, north of the Panhandle, and across the southern Bering Sea to about the Pribilofs. Icing, mixed icing of the light variety, possible between 2,000 to 8,000 feet along the Aleutians, also up over the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, most of the remainder of the state, pretty icing free with the heavier stuff staying south of the Panhandle. And the jet stream, south of the southeast coast, keeping the heavier moisture, and all the storm activity to the south of the state of Alaska. We've got some northerly winds, 60 to 90 knots over the far western Bering Sea, just clipping Shimianatu. And at 9,000 feet, again, low pressure at this elevation over interior Alaska. Northerly winds out over the western central Bering Sea, 40 knots. Otherwise pretty light elsewhere, but northeast up to 40 knots western Arctic coast. And at 3,000 feet, 35-knot northerly winds, western Aleutians. Otherwise, that's about it. Pretty light, really light over mainland Alaska, North Gulf Coast, and the Panhandle area. And for turbulence, could be some mechanical, considerable moderate chop there, northwest coast, western Brooks Range, down to the northern Seward Peninsula, as well as the area from about Adak westward to Shimianatu. Light to isolated moderate chop for the Alaska Peninsula. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecast and other interesting information.
So that Galena flood back in 2013 was at the intersection of weather and climate. Rick, I often get questions about the difference between weather and climate. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, that's a really good question, John. One of the analogies that I like to use, the wardrobe analogy. So in my closet, in my dresser, I've got clothes appropriate for 90-degree weather and 50 below weather. That's the climate part of my wardrobe. But what I'm going to put on today, am I going to wear my Hawaiian shirt because it's going to be a hot July day, or am I going to wear my bunny boots because it's going to be 50 below? That's the weather part of my wardrobe.
You know, there's another interesting analogy. I've heard it said that climate is like your personality, whereas weather is like the mood you're in today. It's like that old John Denver song. Some days are diamonds and some days are stones. That's how weather works.
Of course, it's really a continuous range. Just as the Galena ice jam flooding was the result of a weather event, that ice jam, up against that cold spring, a climate event. So too with less impactful events. For instance, a daily record high temperature is a weather event, one day's high. But we put that in a climate context, say comparing to a century or more of individual temperatures on a given date.
So these extreme events like record high temperatures also happen on the seasonal time scale. Just in the last few years, we've had what was called a marine heat wave in the waters south of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. But the water temperatures in that area set new records in 2015 and 2016.
And most Alaskans are acutely aware that big wildfire seasons are becoming more and more common, most recently in 2015. And the frequency of million-acre seasons has doubled since the early 1990s.
Just this past winter, we had another event in the Bering Sea. The ice extent in the Bering was lower than it had ever been in the last 150 years. That's about as far back as the good records go. There'd never been another year like this one in the Bering with so little sea ice. That had major impacts on the communities along the west coast and the northwest coast.
So, John, what have you been hearing from folks around town about these kind of climate extremes?
I've heard from a number of people who've been here a long time that winters just aren't what they used to be. The average temperatures are higher than they were back in the 1960s and 1970s, and we just don't get the extreme cold days, the days down in the minus 50s or even the minus 60s that we used to experience in Fairbanks back in the 1960s, 1970s, and even into the 1980s.
Well, and it's not just winter either. 2016 and 2017, the summers brought unusually muggy, humid weather to Fairbanks. We're not used to thinking of that in interior Alaska, but record high humidities during the summer months. As in the winter, we've had a significant increase in freezing rain events, since about 2000. So much so that DOT has changed their road treatment strategy, and now we have the school district building in winter rain days into the calendar. And of course, we all need good weather forecasts for these high impact weather events.
We know, though, that weather forecasts are sometimes wrong just 3 or 4 days in advance. So if these weather forecasts and the models they're based on can't pick up events like freezing rain 3 or 4 days ahead, how can we believe what they say about climate for the future?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I think the important thing to remember is that parts of the system are predictable.
So climate models can't give you weather for particular days or even for particular months or years. They actually predict averages. These are averages over periods of a decade or two, or even averages over periods of several years. So they don't give us the month-to-month information that we might want. What are they telling us about the future, though?
Well, these climate models are telling us on the decades-long time frames that warmer winters are going to become more common. We're going to have more frequent, very low sea ice years with late freeze up and early meltout. And the same will be true on Alaskan rivers. We'll have more frequent seasons when freeze up is late and break up is early.
One of the other common threads in these climate model predictions is that heavy rain events and heavy snow events will become more common in the future. That's actually a prediction that the models make for mid-latitudes as well as for high latitudes in areas like Alaska. So we can expect the heavy downpours to become heavier and the heavy winter snows to become heavier than we've been used to. They're also predicting more frequent freezing rain events, getting back to what you talked about earlier. These events that might have happened just once every year or two in the past could actually end up happening several times in a winter in the future, according to the climate models.
And it is important to remember that even in a warming world, there are still going to be seasons and years that are colder than the average, but these cold seasons will become less and less common. So, John, maybe I don't need to have those bunny boots in my closet anymore?
Well, at least you won't need to wear them as often as you did in the past.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Look for variable winds at 20 knots for the Linden Canal Glacier Bay area. Northeast winds 15 knots for Stevens Passage. And northwest winds 15, possible gust to 35 knots for Clarence Strait. In the southern inside water areas, seas at about 6 feet. Otherwise, out along the coastline, south coast, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And south winds 15 to 20 knots. For the north coast, seas running 7 to 9 feet. And for the day Tuesday, central northern inside water, southerly winds on the light side 10 to 15 knots, seas only 2 to 3 feet. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots with 4-foot seas. And for the central and south coast, southwest to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. And south winds 25 knots for the north coast with 13-foot seas. Light variable winds in store for Cook Inlet tomorrow, north of the Forelands. South 15 for southern Cook Inlet. And Kamishak Bay, west winds at about 20 knots. Southwest winds 20 knots for the Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound, winds will be east at 20 knots. And for Tuesday, Prince William Sound, southeast winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet, small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast, south winds 25 knots. Kamishak Bay, south winds 15 knots, 15-knot winds for southern Cook Inlet. North of Foreland Zone, northern Cook Inlet, looking at south winds at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. And the Barren Islands, look for southerly winds at 20 knots. Kodiak Island, west to southwest winds 20 to 30 knots. And 20 to 25-knot westerly winds will blow across the Alaska Peninsula. West winds at 20 knots in the forecast for Bristol Bay with 5-foot seas. And for Tuesday, Kodiak Island, south to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with 6 to 8-foot seas. And Bristol Bay looking at a west wind at 15 knots with seas around 4 feet. Fox Island, small craft advisories, west winds 20 to 25 knots with 8 to 14-foot seas. Small craft advisories also for Adak and Atka. West-northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. And small craft advisories from Mchitka to Shemya for northwest winds at 30 knots. And for the day Tuesday, lighter winds out west, westerlies 20 knots from Shemya to Kiska, 25-knot west winds from Mchitka Island. Northwest winds 30 knots for Adak, Atka, and Unmak Island. On Alaska Island, looking at a northwest wind Tuesday at 25 knots with seas at around 10 feet. And for the Pribilof Islands for Monday, northwest winds 20 knots, seas 6 feet. Brisk wind advisories for the St. Matthew Island area, northern Bering Sea, north winds 25 knots. Brisk wind advisories also for St. Lawrence Island for north winds at 30 knots. And for the Yukon Delta coast, winds will be north of 20 knots, and south of Nunivak Island, northwest at 15. And for the day Tuesday, brisk wind advisories continue St. Lawrence Island for north winds at 25 knots. Otherwise, the southwest coast looking at a north wind at 20 knots. Same forecast for St. Matthew Island, north winds 20 knots. And small craft advisories for the Pueblos for north winds at 25 knots. Light variable winds 5 to 10 knots to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast on Monday. Otherwise, the central and west side looking at northerlies at 20 knots. Brisk wind advisories from Cape Beaufort to Wales for north to northeast winds at 30 knots. And for Tuesday, north winds 20 knots from Wales to Cape Beaufort, north winds 15 knots, western Arctic coast, central coast looking at a northwest wind at 10 knots, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, variable winds 10 knots. And looking at tonight again, there's a chance of snow showers with a weak trough for the eastern Arctic coast there. Otherwise, high pressure and over the north slope will make for mostly clear and cold conditions with temperatures falling well below zero again. Stay windy through the Brooks Range passes. Winter weather advisory continues for the western North Gulf or for the western Arctic coast until midnight tonight, and winter weather advisory for the eastern North Slope, northeastern Brooks Range through midnight Monday night. Otherwise, it'll be dry over much of interior Alaska, some scattered snow showers along the lower Yukon River Valley as well as the Yukon Flats. Chance of rain or snow showers North Gulf Coast with a weakening low south of Prince William Sound. Otherwise, it dries out over the Panhandle. And for Monday, snow showers continue eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula to the Pueblos into Bristol Bay. Isolated snow showers southern Alaska with some clearing periods, more clearing up over the northern interior. Chance of snow for the Arctic coast. Mostly dry with some sunshine for the Panhandle. A few showers down south toward Dixon Entrance. And then another surge of moisture will bring cloudy skies with rain or snow into the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, and snow over the southern interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.